Thanks for being here again and enjoying this series of buildings in Sydney's dynamic 19th century. Continuing on Francis Greenway's brilliant designs, we are now back and we're talking about a church. And it was perhaps Greenway's finest one in terms of its detail. This particular church is St James Church in Phillip Street, and it is within a shouting distance of the convict barracks Greenway himself designed, and not far from the Rum Hospital, a video we did previously. Hi again, I'm Michael Beashall, Australian historical fiction writer, and we continue our journey into the well before their time buildings of the 19th century. The designers and contractors who brought them to life, the government who interfered with them, and the local critics, but not international ones, who panned them. Now, you've heard me talk in previous videos about Governor Macquarie and his influence in bringing a cataclysmic change to Sydney. He thought beyond the square, excuse the pun, and had a principled vision rooted in military pragmatism. A man with altruism and upholding British and Enlightenment values. New South Wales, in particular Sydney and Windsor, was Macquarie's broad canvas on which he painted his vision of far beyond what anyone to that date had done. It was quite extraordinary, his legacy. It was a vision contrary to his masters in England, and that implementation of his imagination would be his undoing. He was fortunate to stay in the colony 10 years, which was a period to give him traction in what he had to do. So without Macquarie's motivation, his vision, passion and forcefulness, many of the buildings that we see today would not have eventuated, or may not have. Macquarie broke the power of the New South Wales Corps by sending its soldiers back to England and installing instead his own beloved 73rd Regiment, with his troops loyal to him. This was important to quieten the raucous voices of the military in trying to thwart Macquarie's plans. So let's get back to our church in Phillip Street. Interestingly enough, this building started out as a courthouse, and that was Macquarie's plan. But when Commissioner Bigg came to Sydney from England, as we've heard in previous videos, to inquire about Macquarie's largesse in investing funds in a penal colony, Bigg recommended to Macquarie that instead of a courthouse for convicts, the people of New South Wales required a new second church. Bigg didn't want convicts roaming around the town, but wanted them concentrated, and the site was a good one for a church, being near the barracks. Greenway's plan was to have a Georgian town plan, and this was supported by Macquarie, having in context with the new barracks combined with the court. But for the nosy bureaucrat, niceties of architecture or town planning were lost on him. But in Greenway's own hand, he had a different view, and that it was always the Reverend Samuel Marsden, a prominent political person of the time, whose direction it was to build a church and not a courthouse. So we have a different picture now, but knowing Greenway's penchant for hyperbole, a courthouse may have been the real direction. According to Professor Freeland in his wonderful book, Architecture in Australia, and I quote, "In this church, Greenway worked a severely restricted palette, relying on the virtual simplicity and proportion to achieve his end. He had a tower and the chance of a spire. It was a clean, uncomplicated building, lightly but firmly designed to meet the needs of uncompromisingly Protestant congregations. Its plain interiors formed the fitting background to the black gown and white bands of the preacher. Elaborate ritual and ornate, colourful vestments had no place in a vehemently evangelical society which saw all hope and cause for pride and pleasure in the unchallengeable rightness of the Protestant ascendancy. End of quote. Heavy stuff indeed. By June 1820, the tower basement of the church was completed, but like all things with Francis Greenway, Henry Kitchen, his architect competitor nemesis, was critical of the building. So we go on with the internecine strife. To Kitchen, the church was too close to other buildings and affected pedestrian traffic, which Greenway agreed. Although Kitchen did compliment the brickwork, the spire did not commence until September 1822. The Sydney Gazette said, and I quote, "The final task was to sheathe the candle snuffer spire in sheet copper, each chevron-shaped copper sheet stamped with the convict broad arrow to discourage theft." Interesting. A copper orb sat on top of it all, completed the steeple. The Gazette went further and on the 11th of January in 1822 reported that on Sunday last divine service was the first time performed in the new church of St. James. The interiors were still far from completed. It was built from bricks, their walls highlighted by pilasters, which is a thickening of the wall made necessary by the need to support the load of the roof trusses, into a series of bays. It was the cloning of this same grid of bays, the windows and the details that gave the building its soundness and anchored it. Sun-filled punched windows, their arched heads made of detail, as on the side walls, was carried around the end walls. So that was the church which stands proud today, even surviving a mid-20th century push to have it removed to make way for an expressway. It was added to by John Verge in later years and now serves as yet, yes you've got it, a courthouse. Now let's move forward a bit for our next building. Thanks for watching.